Understanding visual rhetoric. Visual rhetoric is the whole image that is the entire or dominant persuasive message. And there are three principles of visual rhetoric. 1. Visual messages are pervasive and threaten to eclipse the influence of the spoken and written word in the 21st century. And to this day, you can tell that people are more interested in watching films or shows compared to reading, and they're more often intrigued by these visual messages rather than just pure words. And number 2, visual messages are volatile, eliciting positive and negative responses simultaneously. So visual messages can be both positive or negative, and some expressions that display this are some positive expressions when it comes to visual rhetoric is seeing is believing and a picture is worth 1,000 words. And some negative expressions include don't be deceived by appearances or don't judge a book by its cover. And number 3, visual messages are efficient, emotional, and thematic in the way they persuade. So images are just more easy for us to grasp, and they can also move us emotionally and emit many emotions such as joy, fear, anger, etc. And images lead us to draw our own persuasive conclusions, as images don't argue explicitly. And so the main purpose of visual rhetoric is to create a virtual experience with an audience of transcultural visual learners. The tone is vivid, sensory, design sensitive with an associative and spatial structure. And they also use strategies of appealing to human condition argument. And at least 4 paired elements compose the core of visual messages, and they are 1. Figure and ground, 2. Shapes and space, 3. Balance and direction, and 4. Color and lighting. So for example, for figure, there are 3 basic shapes of images, which are square, triangle, and a circle, and they all bring up specific emotions. So typically square-shaped objects would associate with straightness, honesty, and sometimes dullness. Triangular images tend to suggest conflict and action, and circular forms frequently convey warmth and security. And so some expressions that kind of show this as well is he's a square, it's a love triangle, she has a circle of love and support. And then moving on to the size, scale, and number of these shapes are also related to how space is used. And so lots of white space is most often associated with luxury, higher class, and independence. And the opposite would be like cramped space. And then balance and direction is also something that helps us organize a visual. And so there are images that are either symmetrical or asymmetrical, and symmetry is designed to create formality, and it's visually comforting, while asymmetry tends to create informality, and visuals also direct our eyes to move in certain directions, unlike books that directs us in the regular left to right movement as we read. And then we have color and lighting. Color and lighting affect mood, and they also add on to how visuals create virtual experience. And so some expressions include, he's blue today, you get a gold star, it's a gray area. And it's just an add-on of how like color affects language. Black and white photos are also like described as classic, and rainbow colors have suggested unity, righteousness, and also gay rights. And then lighting also heightens or diminishes the intensity of an image, and so flat lighting or no shadows diminishes the intensity, while textured lighting with varied lights and shadows heightens the intensity. And then some other technical features of visual rhetoric include focus, angle, editing, and sound, and all of these elements influence the way we view and interpret images. And so the two stories this week we read were Violent Media is Good for Kids by Jared Jones and Seek Your Skin, an essay in Unitard Theory by Michael Chabon, which both cover the effects of exposure of superheroes in the media, or specifically violent media. So Jones believed that it is important and more beneficial for children to be more exposed to violent media because he thought that it would help them release their natural inner feelings of rage and uncontrollable feelings that children might experience as they're growing up. However, Chabon states that media could potentially be more dangerous than beneficial to children, as they could get sucked into this false fantasy of the superheroes they adore so much, just because they're so young and impressionable. I understand both points of views, and I agree that being exposed to violence can help prepare you for the real world, but I also understand how getting too sucked into a fantasy, or getting in too deep to a fantasy, can possibly be dangerous, especially for the younger generation. So I think Jones and Chabon both had valid points, but I think there just needs to be a balance between the two, where a child is not completely sheltered from the violent media, but also not too deep into a fantasy where it leads them to delusion.